would like to call the meeting to order. Can you please do the roll call, Ms. Summers?
Commissioner Snyder? Commissioner Young?
Yes. Here.
Commissioner Cooney?
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis?
Here.
Chair Keller?
Here.
Council Member Sneddon? Commissioner Snyder?
Here.
Okay. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Chair Keller, I want to recognize administrative item number 2. The recommendation is incorrect there. We will be seeking, and it's correct on the staff report, but we will be seeking the commission's recommendation with regards to forwarding this on to council for consideration.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any general public comment?
Chair Keller, we have no speakers for general public comment.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
We have no speakers for public comment on the consent calendar.
Okay. Any discussion on the consent calendar? We have just the approval of meeting minutes from last time.
No. I move approval.
I'll second.
Can we have the vote, please?
Commissioner Snyder?
I'll abstain since I was absent.
Oh, right. Commissioner Young?
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney?
I was absent, but I reviewed it and read it. Is that I can?
You can still vote. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Just checking.
Vice Chair Davis?
Yes.
Chair Keller?
Yes.
Change the rules.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. So we're on to the administrative items, and we have first the final draft wastewater and water systems climate adaptation plan.
Good morning, everyone. Melissa Hetrick, Adaptation and Resilience Manager in our Sustainability and Resilience Department. And am I doing slides?
Yes.
Yeah, so today, if you remember, we released a public draft of the Wastewater and Water Systems Climate Adaptation Plan in December. And through the last 2 months, we've been going to different commissions, getting comments, and we've received comment letters. We've made revisions to the plan, and today I'll present on those revisions. And then, in addition, the commission can either give further comments or recommend the plan to be adopted by council. If the recommendation happens, then council will be considering it for adoption April 14th. So again, I'm just going to quickly recap the findings of the plan, talk about the revisions we made, and then we'll get to the recommendation. So as you know, this project is part of a larger program across the city to help our community prepare for current and future climate-related hazards, things like sea level rise, flooding, erosion, and wildfires. This is one of 5 major efforts that we have going right now. We did just launch adaptation options for our waterfront adaptation plan, so you should be hearing about those in the next 3 months. I encourage everyone to get involved in that project, and that's really looking at addressing erosion and flooding that's happening from the ocean to our waterfront area. We have our regional coastal adaptation monitoring program looking at changes to our shoreline along the whole region. And then we have just launched an RFP for modeling of our stormwater system and potential capacity improvements in Laguna watershed. And then we also have the airport climate adaptation plan. So the wastewater and water systems climate adaptation plan, in addition to these other 5 efforts, are funded by the California Coastal Commission and the Coastal Conservancy and city funds. So again, we came to you December 18th for release of the plan, and you all made comments at that time. In addition, Planning Commission and Creeks Advisory Commission has reviewed the plan. We also presented the plan at council on December 9th. So again, as a recap, the plan does analyze all potential impacts. So impacts from groundwater, changes in rainfall patterns, increased drought, increased heat levels, sea level rise, to all the portions of the water and wastewater systems. When we performed a risk assessment in the plan, though, all the highest priority risks that required adaptation measures were to the wastewater system. And really, the highest priority impacts are flooding impacts to the wastewater system. So the plan presents a phased implementation where different actions are taken as different thresholds are reached. And I think we already discussed that the plan does assume that for the wastewater system, which is a critical asset, we really have to assume that the lower area from Highway 101 to the waterfront, that we, even with flood control measures that we are looking at, that we cannot fully prevent flooding in that area. It's just not possible. And that while we can delay the need for some adaptation measures in this plan, we can't eliminate the need for them at all altogether. So really, we can buy time with the measures, but eventually all the adaptation actions in this plan will be needed. So this is the wastewater collection system you all are very familiar with. The point of this slide is just to remind everyone that our system is predominantly gravity-fed, with the exception of a few pump stations. And with a gravity-fed system, there are just a number of ways for inflow and infiltration to happen into the system, particularly when there are flooding events and people are opening manholes. There's all kinds of entry points into the system for floodwaters. And so, as we discussed, this is the 23-24 winter capacity showing graph showing capacities, or actually it's actually the daily inflows into the wastewater treatment plant. And you can see the big spikes that occur in the winter several times during the 23-24 winter, and those directly correspond to large rain events we had. So what this tells us is that we are seeing large amounts of inflow into the system and capacity exceedances that in some cases are leading to sanitary sewer overflows. So because of this, as you know, we've done a number of I&I studies to reduce inflow and infiltration into the system. We have an entire conditions assessment program where we assess 20% of our system every year with CCTV for conditions and make repairs as needed. We're repairing about 2.6 miles of sewer mains every year. We have our hydraulic model, and that combined with our smart covers can really show a lot easier where we're seeing infiltration. In addition, we have a smoke testing program. So this is already in effect, and we are already implementing these measures. But as we discussed, over time, as the climate changes, our rainfall rates are increasing significantly. So while we're seeing the same amount of rainfall kind of annually, we're seeing it all in these very high rainfall intensity events where a lot of rain is coming down at once. And because of that, something like the 10-year storm, which occurred in January 23, is now twice as likely to occur. So it's now essentially the 5-year storm. And the 100-year storm, like we saw in 98, is essentially the 17-year storm, or 7 times likely to occur. In addition, we discussed that with the advent of sea level rise, we are looking at increased saline conditions in our groundwater, particularly south of the railroad, and that by 2.5 feet of sea level rise, or 2076, we really start to see regular flooding from the high tides south of Highway 101 if no action is taken. And again, this is something that we're looking at very closely as part of the waterfront plan, so there is ability, this is without any action. But saline water, as you know, into our wastewater system is a big problem, particularly when it becomes large amounts, because the wastewater treatment plant cannot treat saline water because it utilizes freshwater bacteria for treatment. And so when large amounts of seawater come into the system, we either have to shut down the plant, or the bacteria are destroyed and can take several weeks to come back. And so this is really an important turning point that we need to address. And then in addition, we did talk about that right now during a 100-year rainfall event, There is flooding that occurs around El Estero Water Resources Center. So as you know, El Estero Water Resource Center was intentionally built on a higher piece of land. And so really now what we see is flooding at the access points, so blocking access around the plant. But over time, with increased rainfall amounts and also with sea level rise, we start to see floodwaters actually entering the plant itself. And so the key recommendations for the next 20 years of implementation are that we really aggressively look at the low-lying areas south of Highway 101 to the waterfront and seal manholes, line pipes, aggressively implement our infiltration master plan, and that we also look at ways to increase capacity during wet weather events. So these are things like wet weather storage basins at El Estero, additional equalization basins, and we need to do a study looking at potential options for that. In addition, the plan does recommend that within the next 25 years, we need to start converting some of the very low-lying areas, particularly next to the shoreline, from a gravity-fed system to a low-pressure system. And so in order to facilitate that, the private connections would have to be pressurized first with grinder pumps for us to pressurize the mains 25 years later. So the plan does recommend that we come forward with a study in the next few years, kind of outlining all the options to do that, and how it could be phased, how it could be funded, how each customer would do it, and also recommending an ordinance that new connections in those areas put in pressurized equipment. At El Estero Water Resources Center, the study recommends starting now a study of implementing a flood wall system at that facility, and then also formally making formal our operations during rainfall events when we don't have access to the plant. And then the plan also highlights that we need to either protect or relocate the desalination intake pipeline weir box. That project has already been on our radar, and protect the utilities under Cabrillo Boulevard. And again, those are both part of our waterfront adaptation planning. So the plan is to update the plan every 10 years, closely monitor system conditions. As far as the next 20 years, it's going to take about $2 to $3 million for the studies that I mentioned, and those will be followed by between $50 and $130 million in infrastructure modifications. In addition, we'll need staff resources like engineers and project managers. So just to note that as these capital projects are coming up, such as the flood wall system, we are incorporating those into our capital improvement program. So it's like any other capital project that the city does. We'll fund it with either state or federal grants, low-interest loans, if we need to do municipal bonding, all the various infrastructure funding mechanisms that we have available to us. So throughout this process, we did receive a number of verbal comments at all the commission meetings we went to. We also received a comment letter from Santa Barbara Channel Keeper that's included in your packet. And there were very, very common themes. Almost all the commissions had the almost exact same comments, so that makes it easy. But most of the comments and questions were about the eventual pressurization of the system. So wanting to understand the logistics of it, a lot of concerns about the financial and logistical burden to customer connections. Could we fund it? Could we do it ourselves and charge people? How can we make it the most effective and efficient given the scale of what needs to happen? In addition, there was a number of questions about alternatives to doing that. Is there some way that we don't have to pressurize the system and do all this work? And as I mentioned, the follow-on study looking at pressurization will look at all these alternatives and will look at all the logistics and financial burden and cost out all the different options. But our preliminary assessment is that while there are other measures that we could use, such as like advanced treatment or RO to address, say, salinity issues from one area or a small amount of salinity issues, that at some point in the future, the inflow problem and the capacity problem and the salinity issue will be so much that it's likely we'll eventually need pressurization. So the question really is, do we do these interim steps and put money toward that, or do we just start pressurizing? And so that's part of what this study will look at, but our initial take on it from our consultant is that it's likely that pressurization in the long term will be needed. In addition, there were a number of questions about examples of how they converted other places. And again, this study will get into all the details of that. We did ask our consultants for some examples, and there are a number. I have to say, there's many of people converting septic systems to pressurized systems. So that happened at Rincon Point and a number of other places in California. But also throughout the nation, especially areas in tidal areas, there have been a number of these transitions from like older gravity-fed systems that were failing quite a bit, causing sanitary sewer overflows from rainfall or emergent groundwater and salinity, and going over to pressurized systems. So places like Hilton Head, what were the Signal Mountain, Tennessee. So we can go through all these kind of case studies as part of this plan, but they really do offer the ability for us to kind of look at what other people have done and different mechanisms for converting. The other major issue brought forward, and particularly with the Santa Barbara Channel Keeper letter, was the inflow and infiltration issues. The comment being we should be implementing the extra measures now. And I think we tried to highlight more in the draft that is the plan. So in some cases with these bigger improvements, such as capacity improvements, we have to study that first and get a design though first. And so that's more what the plan was saying, but I think that was misinterpreted. But no, the idea is that we would start those aggressive measures now. There were several comments just advocating for us to start talking to our regional partners now, even though we're not ready to make a decision about the long-term fate of El Estero, but wanting to start to talk to Goleta Sanitary and other people about regionalization of our wastewater system. And I think that that's a great comment because this plan perfectly sets us up for those discussions now. In addition, most other treatment facilities also have the same requirement that was put on us for our NPDES permit that required this plan. And so they'll be moving forward on those studies in the next few years. And so it's a perfect time for us all to start talking about that. And then there was understandably a lot of questions about where all this funding is going to come from. And I think I mentioned that we do have some money, approximately $50,000 from the wastewater fund and water fund to kind of each year annually to start some of these studies. But there is going to be a gap for both the studies and infrastructure. And as I mentioned, part of moving forward is incorporating those into our capital program and looking at closing the gap. Do you want to comment at all on that?
I'm going to add to that. Certainly, we're making some contributions to this, but there's a significant gap there, and you are all aware of our challenges with just our rates as they are. Today, we're making significant investments, so there is a big gap right now. And I think over the next couple years, we're going to need to kind of work through how do we start to dig in on funding a lot of this stuff. There's a few things I wanted to add as we kind of went through this. Keep in mind about half of our system is actually public and half is private. I mean, as far as mileage goes, there's a lot of private laterals out there. And as we've been finding with our SLIP program, there's a lot of private laterals that are in need of replacement or major repairs, which contribute to the I&I equation. Not to say it's solely private laterals, but I think that kind of doubles down on why we need to go after both at the same time. We are certainly making a commitment, and we will be revisiting whether or not we need to ramp up the commitment we're making right now to rehab the public system. And then, of course, we're working on a SLIP business case that looks at what other options we might do to start helping more homeowners, because we understand that there's a pretty big need out there for lateral investment. And then the conversion issue is a big one. Like, again, the community's asking us for help. We have our own issues of maintaining it. So I think that's going to be an interesting question. One of them could be an assessment district, of which all the properties are assessed. It starts to build up a war chest of funding that could help property owners with these conversions. But we're going to need to explore all those different options to kind of get there, because it really is a pretty defined area that is directly impacted by this low pressure area that can be regionally mapped and defined. And then finally, on the regional coordination, it's find ourselves in a unique time. We just Kelly McAdoo, our city administrator, just received a letter from Montecito Sanitary asking for permission to sit down and start negotiating with staff about a potential arrangement to send us their wastewater flows. They are in the midst of weighing options about a major investment in building a new wastewater treatment plant for themselves, and would like to understand what it would mean to partner with the city and send us their wastewater for treatment, which in many ways would coincide with this whole idea of starting to regionalize. Again, it would kind of feed into itself as we continue to talk. And of course, we know Goleta San is in a very similar elevation to ours facility and will likely be on a similar timeline to need to relocate and centralize, hopefully, at that point. So with that.
Pardon me. With that, I'll hand it over to the commission for questions and comments and to consider the recommendation for the plan to council for adoption.
Thank you very much for the presentation. One quick question. So we have a number of capital projects right now in the city, the electrical rehabilitation or replacement of the electrical system, the Estero, others, for example, we were just talking about the pump stations that are, low lying. Are those already considering some of these issues so that we can incorporate that?
Yeah, Shell Keller, that's exactly right. They do. I don't recall the exact planning horizons on those facilities, but I believe it was somewhere in the 50-year planning horizon that those were built to maintain the flood record for those areas. And so the electrical system has been identified for that, and so has Braemar Lift Station that was recently upgraded.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Question for you. On page ES-3 of the final draft, under implementation in the next 25 years, you mention implementation triggers. And is there a chart or table somewhere in the draft that defines what those are? I kind of looked for it, couldn't find it, and perhaps I just overlooked it.
There is a figure, I currently don't know the number of it. Hold on, I'm just looking. I think it's at the end of the executive summary that summarizes the different phases. Right now,
And what page should I?
yeah, I'm pulling it up, sorry. Huh. No,
Oh, yeah, this one?
it's this one you really need the glasses for. It's
Doesn't have a page number, but
on
it's
page,
it's at the very end, it's after ES 29.
Yeah.
And then the figure starts.
it's
and
figure
on the back
ES
page.
8.
I got it.
So right now,
Let's keep going back.
the triggers really are based around amounts of sea level rise reached. But in addition, part of what we'll be looking at is in our conditions assessments, the conditions of pipes. In addition, the plan does recommend, I didn't get into this as much, but close monitoring of certain conditions particular to the wastewater system. So one of those is the salinity level of our superficial groundwater in that low-lying area. And so we have already begun to start thinking about how to track that over time and begin a program there. So right now, it's not like a specific numeric. It's more like by this amount of sea level rise, you're likely to need to do this. And it's really going to be based upon looking at how much saline water we're getting into the system, how much capacity problems we're seeing, and tracking that over time. But I think the plan's really recommending these 20-year measures be implemented now to be proactive. And then we'll monitor their effectiveness over time to see if additional measures are needed. I just also note that because we have these parallel programs of flood reduction measures and waterfront adaptation, that those themselves have their own like phasing and adaptation triggers related to like how close erosion's getting in, how much flooding is being seen. So the other thing we're tracking is the frequency of flooding that we're seeing and how much that's happening each year. And so all that's kind of coming together into this regional and citywide monitoring program. And so that's how it's defined now. But I do agree that it could use some more refinement, and I think that that could be done as part of the follow-on studies looking at how long particular measures will last. So things like a flood wall system, we are going to have to look at to what level are we protecting, and that will be a decision that will have to be made as part of that design, as an example.
So do you have some kind of an algorithm to use where you're collecting all this information and then here's the trigger to actually start something?
Well, right now we're focusing on the suite of things that need to happen in the next 20 years that we are going to start now and really focusing on getting those on the ground while also implementing this monitoring program. And part of monitoring over time, we'll be able to see like the rate of change that we're seeing. But a lot of the triggers are based on amounts of sea level rise reached and monitoring that. That's why a lot of the measures are described in the phasing is described by the amount of sea level rise reached, not the year that it's reached. Because as we see, it might change in the timing. And so unfortunately, the way that that monitoring happens, because there's so much noise in the sea level rise data year to year with El Nino and different swells and all that kind of stuff, it takes us a while, a few years, to understand what the actual median has been and how that's changed over time. But we are getting that information as it's coming in. And so that's why we're really focusing right now on establishing that monitoring, because it doesn't exist. It didn't exist previous to this to even understand the trajectories that we're at. But that's also why we're really focusing on what needs to happen now, no matter what, to get that on the ground.
Just a suggestion and last comment, for the council's benefit, you might make some reference to this figure ES8.
Okay.
So they can quickly look at that, because I think that's an important table graph. The reference should be on ES3 somewhere. like a
Or maybe
footnote.
move it up, yeah.
No, just to let them know, see figure ES-8.
I had another question kind of related to how this gets communicated to council. So this is the water and wastewater systems plan, but it's really focused on wastewater systems. And I think you addressed that very clearly in the report of like what came up was the greatest risks are around, flood risks to the wastewater system. But I'm wondering, like, what is the key finding on the water system? Is it this was assessed and there isn't a high risk and therefore we're focusing on wastewater, or is it that it needs more assessment? Because I think a key question is like, well, what is the climate risk to our drinking water?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think we've also tried to approach it through the urban water management plan as well, because a lot of that is kind of looking at the vulnerabilities of our water supplies and doing some projections out 50 years. So I think we're still struggling with how best to capture that, but I feel like the water supply is better captured in the urban water management plan, which is also our long-range water supply plan, versus this, which is more asset-based in the city, per se.
But even like I was, it didn't come up that there was like a major fire risk to Cater or something like that. Like even on the asset side, clarifying, like, was that all actually part of this plan, or was it not really assessed?
It was assessed.
Yeah.
So yeah, all those types of, it's just that comparative to the risks with the wastewater system, they're not as high.
Yeah.
I think it's also, as Mr. Hagmark noted, a lot of the issues associated with wildfire and all the sediment that comes down and treatment issues, we already are planning for that and already having to deal with that. And so, as he mentioned in the urban water supply management plan, we did incorporate all those factors at that time.
Yeah.
And
So I
climate
think just good to
changes.
mention that,
Yeah,
right, in the
okay.
context of this to council, that like that is being addressed elsewhere.
Yeah, and I would just also mention, the plan did look at impacts to our drinking water, groundwater systems, and it really didn't show a big impact there because of the depth that we are getting our groundwater, drinking water from, and also where it's located. It didn't show an impact to that for quite a long time. And so, aside from infrastructure that's on the beach, like the desalination weir box, intake weir box, there really weren't like huge risky impacts identified, and that's part of why
Well,
they're not.
that's good to know,
yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were going through that. There's so many things to kind of take into consideration because I feel like, and this commission probably knows this, I mean, desal was a climate adaptation. It really was. It was addressing some of those things. It was a commitment we've made, well, you know, almost 10 years ago now, or 10 years ago we made that commitment. But how do you recognize that in here and how that kind of plays in? And again, I don't think we spent too much time because we made that decision and we're moving on. But it really is part of this bigger picture of how we're adapting to climate change.
Question on the low-pressure sewer conversion study, 5 years, 0 to 5 years, then facilitate low-pressure customer connections, 5 to 25, and implement in the 25 to 50 years. You're at the Planning Commission. I'm wondering what the thought is on conditioning new development to be ready for that in that regard.
Commissioner Davis, that's a really good question. Planning Commission had a lot of questions, but they were supportive of the eventual transition. Their main comment was trying to make it as easy as possible for existing connections to transfer. They did comment that requiring new connections to have pressurized equipment, they wanted to know the cost difference and things like that, but otherwise they were supportive.
They didn't care about timing, though, in terms of their involvement in new development. Because buildings basically approved today, constructed over the next 10 years, and then going to have a useful life of 100 years.
Yeah.
So they're going to be in that time period.
They were supportive of starting that process now so that we start over time to see new connections instead of having it all happen at once.
Right.
And so that when people are making investments now that they'll last and they won't have to redo their connection
Yeah.
25 years from now.
Okay. And then and it just made me think, looking at our next item on the agenda, at some point, basically having a condition of new development that in fact they recognize that is coming, and if there is potential assessment districts in whatever that you might have a no protest condition within the conditions on new development.
One of the things, if you get the time to follow it, the presentation on the waterfront adaptation is really interesting because it buys the downtown more time, or the waterfront more time, by some of the protections that are proposed. It doesn't eliminate the impacts that we will see, but it does buy more time, which I think is part of the challenge here is, I really don't want to be the sky is falling, and then people are like, it didn't fall, lost
Yeah.
in trust in you. And so how do we move forward in a way, and I appreciate this, putting this on their radar, having them know this is coming, having the conversation, pointing to the indicators we're using to judge kind of the progression of this slow-moving disaster, so that they don't lose trust or faith in local government to advise on this, because that spectrum could be 2050 to 2075. We could have this range in which, not to say it's not needed, but that's a big difference. That could be someone's, they live here for 25 years. That could be their entire, time in this community. So anyway, it's a big window right now, and wanting to be, I think, as transparent and forthcoming as possible without being over alarmist on some of this.
Thank you. These are always so impressive, these presentations, but also the sky is falling, and it really does make it clear. I think a couple things, since you mentioned the Enhanced Urban Water Management Plan, maybe included in here too, because I'm thinking of building, if you said since part of it is climate adaptation, that maybe it wasn't part of the sea level rise adaptation plan, but because it affects our water and wastewater systems, and or maybe even a separate short section because it's called the water and wastewater plan, but it only talks about wastewater. And I think even if you assess the water but doesn't need anything, it's going to need funding in some different ways. And I think as we're kind of pressing the point of making polluters pay or how we're going to get funding for that, I think somewhere in there, I think the point was really well made, but then also adding those what's already being done and heavily funded for the water systems portion.
Councilmember Snedden, that actually all is in the main plan, so I think what we should do is just bring it up into the executive summary. This is just the executive summary. The plan is 313 pages.
Yeah.
But I think your point
We noticed
as well,
on the bottom here,
Yeah,
it's
your
page
point is well
114
taken.
pages.
that most people aren't going to get past the executive summary, and so bringing that up, I think is a great idea.
And then maybe consistent across all of those plans, because you really do have to be going to all these different meetings to have seen the airport plan, the waterfront plan, what we're doing with desal all separately, and they're not even all at one commission. They're all at council, but it really spread apart. So maybe one sort of executive summary of the executive summaries of how they fit in, because these do all tie back to the sea level rise adaptation plan, but also the water management plan. So it doesn't even have to be long, but some master spot where everything goes to the flow chart out from there or something. Thank you.
Any other comments? Any public comment?
Chair Keller, we have no speakers for public comment on this item.
Okay, so we do have a recommendation.
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
Can we have the roll call?
Should we state the recommendation a little, that recommendation? Should we state it into the record since it wasn't on the
Sure.
agenda?
You want to give me that slide back? It's bottom.
You're supposed to memorize it. Thank you.
Okay, make a motion that the commission consider and forward a recommendation to city council for adoption of the final draft wastewater and water systems climate adaptation plan.
Second.
Okay. Commissioner Snyder?
Yes.
Commissioner Young?
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney?
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis?
Yes.
Chair Keller?
Yes.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much. So next, we're going to hear about out-of-agency service agreements for sanitary sewer system connections.
As Ms. Hoffenberg makes her way up here, I will kick off this conversation. So this is a very unique element of a larger picture concerning LAFCO. And we're looking forward to kind of getting into this detail, but kind of setting the stage for a larger conversation about LAFCO that we will bring back and start talking about where we're headed with that. And with that, I'll turn to Ms. Hoffenberg.
Good morning, Commissioner, Councilmember Snedden. My name is Dana Hoffenberg. I'm a water resources analyst, and I'm going to be talking to you today about out-of-agency service agreements and a resolution that updates the city's policies regarding connecting outside city limit properties to the city's wastewater system. So as Mr. Hagmark stated, we wanted to give you just a bit more background. We don't get a chance to talk about these things a lot, so I'll be going into what LAFCO is, a little bit about the city boundaries, what out-of-agency service agreements are, and then I'll talk about the proposed resolution and recommendation. So the city occasionally does receive requests from properties located outside the city limits to connect to the city's wastewater system. There is state government code that requires the local agency formation commission to first approve those connections. So the city can't just make those on our own. We do have to have support from LAFCO to allow those connections. What is LAFCO? LAFCO oversees the administration of development and the orderly boundaries of development, essentially. It was established in about the 60s, I believe, when there was a lot of development booming throughout the state. They exist at the county level, so every county in California has a LAFCO. LAFCO's authority expanded in 2000, and it really does administer all of the boundaries of municipalities as well as special districts. An interesting piece is that the city's utility infrastructure existed before LAFCO had a lot of authority over our boundaries. So we do have some city utility infrastructure that already existed outside of city limits.
I did want to note here that the city does not have a representative in LAFCO, which, as we kind of go through this conversation and maybe as part of the follow-up conversation, might be something that we want to eventually maybe recommend onto the council, is that we should have a council representative on LAFCO, given some of the issues that we'll be talking about here.
Is that normal? Like, do other counties have representation on if that's like a standard thing throughout California?
I think it depends on what kind of issues you have. If you don't have any issues, maybe it's not that important to you, but I think as we'll kind of walk through here, I think there's a growing need for us to have a voice and representative on LAFCO. Mm-hmm.
How are LAFCO members or appointed or selected?
I believe they're appointed by the Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a special district elected representative by law.
So I'll mention the sphere of influence as well. So per the city's general plan, the sphere of influence is a plan for the probable physical boundaries and service area of a local agency. So generally speaking, it contemplates what the city's limits might be in the future. And with consultation by the city, LAFCO reviews and updates the city's sphere of influence every 5 years. And it is a little bit interesting for us because we are a full service city, so we are both a city and the utility provider. So that makes things a little bit interesting. LAFCO also oversees the boundaries of special districts like water districts and things. When we're talking about our service area, we're not just talking about our water and sewer service area, we're talking about the actual official city limits. So I have some maps for you to just visualize things. So this is a map of the city boundaries as well as our wastewater system and the city's sphere of influence. The black line is the city limits. The green lines are the city sewer mains, and the pale yellowish areas are the sphere of influence. So you can see that the city does have our sphere of influence expanding outside on the western side of the city, but we do not have any sphere of influence on the eastern side of the city, which is interesting. You'll also see on the western side of the city these pockets or county islands, I suppose. They're basically holes in the city. So those pale yellow areas, they are county properties. They are not within city limits, but they are completely surrounded by city limits. So this does make it a little bit interesting from a utility perspective.
I wanted to point out on here just the kind of little history with Mission Canyon. It is a system owned, the collection system is owned by the county. There was a good several decades in which the city operated it on behalf of the county. Then the county decided they wanted to take it back. They currently operate it, and we do all their treatment. So they basically bring it to city limits, and then we use our collection system to bring it down to El Cerro and provide treatment for them. But it is currently there. It's a county collection system.
Right, that's referred to as Community Service Area 12, or CSA 12, is the Mission Canyon wastewater system. So just wanted to zoom in a little bit. So this is the northwestern part of the city. As you can see, this is one of those county islands. This is, where Apple Grove Street is. And you'll see there's a sewer main actually already going through there. So that sewer main was constructed prior to LAFCO requiring additional approvals from them before the city could go outside our city limits. So it does make for an interesting situation where there'll be one street that's on city sewer and then another street that isn't, and then a neighbor wants to connect because their neighbor's connected, but we basically have to say, sorry, it's a long bureaucratic process to be able to be connected. But this is just to give you some context of why we're getting requests for service. It's often because we are the only utility in the area, and we're the only utility that makes sense for them to connect to. And then this is just a zoom in on the eastern side. You'll see this is the Barker Pass area. We do have sewer mains that go up into the county up there as well. So now we'll talk a bit about out-of-agency service agreements, or OASAs. So in order for a property outside city limits to connect to city wastewater service, LAFCO does either require that the property annex and become part of the city, or they have to enter into an OASA, an out-of-agency service agreement. And this allows them to connect to city sewer without having to actually go through the annexation process. Most properties don't want to go through the annexation process. It is a bit of an arduous process and it can be quite expensive. So most properties would rather not have to annex. And our experience when we're talking to property owners, LAFCO, their mission is orderly development, so they would like people to annex. So that is the first requirement, generally speaking. However, they do allow OASAs instead of annexation in certain situations, particularly in situations where there is a health and safety condition. And so we are seeing those more and more. Generally, when people come to us wanting to connect, it's because their septic system has failed and they've received a letter from county public health saying that your septic system has failed and you must correct it. And my understanding is that septic requirements have gotten a lot more stringent. So it is often very difficult for people to bring their septic systems up to code. So the general preference is that they just connect to a public utility, which in most cases is us. We do also have municipal code section regarding OASAs. So this section basically mirrors government code. It allows for connections outside city limits to the sewer system if the owner enters into a written agreement with the city, which is the OASA. It stipulates that the property owner is responsible for all the costs of connection. So they do have to pay for, the regular sewer buy-in fees. They'll become a regular customer. If they have to build a new lateral, they have to, pay for all of this. One piece of the OASA is also a requirement that is per government code, so we have to put this stipulation in an OASA, but the property owner has to waive their right to protest any future annexation. So that is something we're required to put in the OASA, and that is also reflected in our municipal code.
Yeah, just a question. That was in the earlier resolution, the 94 resolution, as a requirement, but now that it's in the code, then we don't have to put that into the new resolution, correct?
It is in the municipal code, it is in the 94 resolution, and it will continue to be in the new resolution.
Okay, I didn't see it in the draft of the new resolution.
Okay, I can double check on that.
Okay.
If it's not in the resolution, then yes, you are correct. It is already covered because it's in the municipal
again,
code.
but my question was, why wasn't it? And then
Thank
when
you
you
for catching
explained
that.
that, then I could see the connection.
Yeah, you're correct.
thanks.
Yeah, it is required per state government code, and it's in the municipal code, so.
Okay,
yeah, we will
and
make
so
sure.
just to follow up with that, I'm sorry to differ. You had shown earlier, like up in Barker Path, which is on the east side, not on our sphere of influence, so it's not intending that we would ever annex that area. They still have that condition then?
It is a requirement of the state code, so we still have to put it in there, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
I mean, I think a lot of those properties were connected prior to any LAFCOs being approved. So I think a lot of those properties never signed an OASA because that sewer area, I think that's built in like the 50s or something. So
But when a new connection comes up on the eastern boundary,
correct.
it still have that condition. Great,
Correct,
thank you.
yes. Okay, so getting a bit more into the proposed resolution, it amends the existing city council policy from 1994. It simplifies policy language a bit just to align it more closely with the state government code. And it allows OASAs in 3 circumstances. So if the property is planning on annexing, they're going through the annexation process, and we just need to get them connected prior to the annexation being complete. It allows OASAs if there's a health and safety threat. This is the most common one. This is the one that I've experienced the most, that we get the most requests for. It's generally because a septic system has failed. And then it also allows us to do an OASA to satisfy an existing service obligation. I don't know of any, honestly, but this is just to make sure, if we have an old agreement that comes up from the past, that we're still able to connect them so that we can satisfy that obligation. A couple other changes is now with the reorganization of water resources becoming its own department, the old resolution references the Public Works Director, so now we're reassigning that to the Water Resources Director. And the biggest change that really helps streamline this whole process is it authorizes the Water Resources Director to sign these OASAs. Previously, we have to individually take every single request to City Council, which, given that this is a process that's meant to help when there's an urgent health and safety issue, it really slows down the process. It creates a big administrative burden on the property owner and then also on staff. Taking things to council takes a lot of time. There's over a month lead time to get on the council agenda. It takes staff a bunch of time in multiple different departments to review everything for what we're just trying to correct a health and safety issue. So that's the biggest change here. It's just going to really streamline everything and make us be able to provide better customer service. So looking ahead and just some more information, since 2008, there have been 9 OASAs signed, so it's not a huge amount, but we are seeing an increasing trend in requests as septic systems are aging and beginning to fail. We've received 11 requests in the last 2 years. Granted, not all of these have resulted in an actual OASA, but we are just getting a lot more inquiries. And the inquiries, they are quite time intensive. It's generally just, it's a property owner that has received this letter and they're not doing a bigger project. So it takes a lot of handholding and us explaining to them and trying to usher them through what is a very bureaucratic process because it requires approval from the city and then approval from LAFCO and then permitting. So as much as we can do to streamline this project to help correct a health and safety issue, the better. And that's what we're trying to do with this current resolution. So longer term, as Mr. Hagmark alluded to earlier, staff is working with LAFCO and the county on larger long-term solutions, looking at it more from a bigger picture of how can we not do these one-off situations, how can we address something before things become a health and safety issue. So that is something we're thinking about and contemplating separately. But this resolution really is just to address this immediate need to help people move through the process who are experiencing an urgent health and safety request. And with that, the recommendation is for the Water Commission to forward this resolution to City Council for adoption.
Thank you very much. Comments?
I just had a question. What is a sphere of influence?
Yeah, so the sphere of influence is, we work with LAFCO on creating it, and it contemplates the area that the city could eventually expand to, essentially. So it kind of is a plan for what the city boundaries might look like in the future. And the general plan defines it as the probable physical boundaries and service area of a local agency.
And so that part of on the eastern side where we have some infrastructure, but it's not a sphere of influence, why is that?
I encourage Commissioner Davis, you probably have more background than I do, but
I don't even want to get into the politics of the eastern side. Just leave it at that.
it's political, yeah. I mean, these are planning items, and that we as the utility are affected by. We're kind of stuck in the middle a little bit as the utility, but yeah, there's a lot of politics around it.
I would add some more depth to that. LAFCO right now has been, I don't want to say, weaponizing water and wastewater service as a way to force annexation or force these areas to be cleaned up. The city council has taken a very neutral approach to this. They do not want to force homeowners into this. There's not a big there's not much to be gained and don't want to create ill will with people, which I agree. Really, what we think is probably a path forward is setting some type of like 20, 30-year time horizon that annexation will occur, because on both sides, there are roads that are in very poor condition that would need to be brought up. If they're going to be a city street, they need to be brought up a certain standard, sidewalks, curbs, all that gutters. Who pays for that? And so if we're looking to clean up some of these areas, it's really defining those responsibilities and those who's picking up those costs. And of course, getting that long horizon, people know if they're buying this home, it's eventually going to be moving into city limits. There's a lot of pieces there, but I feel like without having representation at LAFCO, it's really complicated to try and get the ball rolling on something like that. But yeah, I don't, in the meantime, we kind of muddle through this. We feel like we're stuck in the middle between mom and dad fighting here. We just want to provide services to the community. I don't really pick a side on this. If a customer needs wastewater service, I think we're happy to step in and provide that. But this issue, and rightfully so, if these folks are going to be, they're in this gray area where they really have no say on our water rates or wastewater rates if they're not in city limits. So it's kind of so it does make sense to clean up our boundaries. It's just we really need to be thoughtful about how exactly we approach these property owners who may have strong feelings. What did we learn recently? They don't pay what if they're outside?
Oh, utility users tax. So the city has a general tax of 6% on water service. And if you're a water customer outside city limits, you don't pay the UUT. But there is no UUT on wastewater.
But you do pay on cable TV and other things. And
Internet.
it ends up being over
Yeah.
10%.
Yeah.
Those aren't
That's a
city
property tax?
resources.
In the city.
If you're annexed into the city, then you're subject to the utility users tax, which has a broad spectrum of things that are taxed upon that are not charged to county residents.
So this is why homeowners basically, they have something go wrong with their septic system, and then all of a sudden, it turns into something where they have this long administrative process that requires them to, on an ongoing basis, pay more money. So that's why they don't want to annex. Is that accurate?
I would say specifically to wastewater, the UUT, the utility users tax isn't really an issue for wastewater because we don't charge for some reason. I don't know why, but there's no UUT on wastewater, only water. But annexation there's a lot of requirements with annexation. Like if your street isn't up to code or public standard, like you might have to like update your sidewalks or the lighting. And so there's like a lot of other things that go along with annexation, or they just don't, for some reason, they don't want the label as being within city limits. There's various things. So, and it can take a long time. And, you have to go through planning. You have to probably hire a lot of professionals. So people are just interested. They're like, my septic system is failing. I just want it to be fixed. They don't really want to reorganize the entire future of their property.
Yeah.
So that's generally what happens.
Makes sense. Thank you.
A little follow-up question on that one. If you're annexing a big area, and it's really for Joshua, do they pay a buy-in fee into the system, right?
Yes.
But if we do it on a health and safety matter, the individual doesn't.
No, they do.
They do buy.
They do.
Because I didn't see that talked about anywhere.
Yeah, and it says this in the agreement, they become a regular city customer. They have to abide by all the rules and regulations that all other utility customers abide by. And part of that is, paying all your regular permitting costs. So they still have to, this agreement just says, we're committing to let you in, but you still have to get your permit. And part of that connection fee is paying your buy-in fee, paying your connection, public works permit fee. So they still do have to pay a buy-in cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm just going to ask about this Barker Pass area. And so these are people who, I may be related to one, so I'll put that caveat there. These are people who requested to be using the service. And then my question is then, what about beyond that? I mean, there's so many streets right next door, right up there. And so what, how far do we go before we're making a deal or something with Montecito to consolidate these plans? And if that's in discussion, possibly, or this just what we're doing for now? And if something should change later, can then they go in with the Montecito plan, or does it bind them forevermore, or how does that work?
So LAFCO does municipal service reviews, or MSRs, where they take a broader look every 5 years at different specific topics. So they'll do a municipal service review on water service, on wastewater service. And so they look at us collectively. And in the last municipal service review, we brought this area up as an area that we wanted to like reconcile. It is even more complicated in that, you can see this right. This area, like right here, is in no one's service area. It's not even Montecito Sanitary. Montecito Sanitary starts like here. So it has been brought up to LAFCO. They had some recommendations on potential changes to whose service area it should be. I think their recommendation for that one was there's also some reorganization potential happening at Montecito Sands. They were kind of saying this should be contemplated as we're looking into those larger things. So they're looking into the larger picture. It's, I think quite slow moving. But those things are documented in official reports, and we're looking into it. And for the Barker Pass, I don't know the history of who requested what. This was probably in the 50s, so I don't really know the history of how that extension happened.
Well, and I think it even gets more messy with water because we provide water service to pretty much all that area outside city limits right
That's
there.
what I was going to ask next, if you have an area that's water system also and wastewater, and are they always co-located? Like, are some people just on water but not sewer, some sewer, not
Yes.
water? Yeah, okay.
Every combination exists.
it's
And- and
complicated
these-
through
In these
there.
boundary areas, the answer is just yes.
Okay.
We are contemplating one OASA right now for a property that's here. So, these kind of situations that make sense, of course, they're coming to us because there's a sewer main on the street over. The Montecito Sand isn't even in that area. So, yeah, so it is important that we're taking a larger look at this, and I think that's what we're doing, but there's a lot of people that have to come to the table. And I think part of the issue is, LAFCO is used to looking at more boundaries that are imaginary, right? They're political boundaries, whereas when we get into the utility space, there's a lot of infrastructure here. And I don't think they're really used to dealing with that. It's hard to say, okay, you're in charge of this now, and it's like, well, do we understand the implication of, we have to build things or take care of infrastructure. So that's another nuance that just makes this conversation a bit complicated.
Yeah, and it's right near Westmont and near Cold Spring School, and there's a lot of, being the representative, right, of this whole boundary, I think there's a lot of pride in, Montecito versus the city of Santa
Yeah.
Barbara. And the other one I wanted to ask about was the CSA 12, or that gets so complicated when along a street, it's zigzagging back and forth between city, county, as you know. And it's not just the water and wastewater, but we have issues with like the road itself, and then up above Laurel Reservoir there too. So I don't know, maybe that's a conversation for another time about annexing. That makes sense to annex there, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that area is in our sphere of influence, so that's at least more recognized as a potential thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
Oh, just one quick one. When it goes to LAFCO, it's a city application, or does the property owner carry that application?
I think the LAFCO generally prefers it to be the city. In more recent history, we've had the property owner carry it because it is a very, it's a bit of an arduous task for staff to take on, especially since they're not an existing customer, they're not paying into the system. So we help them and we guide them, but as much as they can take the initiative and push things forward, that's generally how our approach has been.
Do we charge for our time?
Not right now, but that's being contemplated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any public comment?
Chair Keller, we have no speakers for public comment on this item.
Okay, so we have a recommendation that the commission forward this item on to city council for approval. Can we have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Second?
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis.
Yes.
Chair Keller.
Yes. Okay, on to our next item, the Water Resources Department status update.
All right.
hear what's going on with water resources.
Thank you, Chair Keller, Commissioners, Councilmember Sneddon. Yes, we were trying to think of how we could keep the commission informed. So I know this is a policy commission, but felt it kind of influences a lot of what we're working on and wanted just to provide some information. So on February 3rd, the City Council formally approved the creation of the standalone Water Resources Department. I'm really excited about that. Glad that we could recognize, as the commission already knows, just the significance of what's going on in water resources. And so kind of here, just kind of gathering some of the facts, staffing levels, our annual budget. A number I'm still working on here is just the replacement value of all of our water assets. It's pretty significant. Not something I've seen written down. We have the depreciated value, but it really doesn't reflect the replacement costs of that. Combined between water and sewer, over 600 miles of pipeline. We have 5 treatment plants, pump station, lift stations, and then, as I've been learning, just oodles of land, particularly in the Forest Service area, that we collected probably at the turn of the century, the late 1800s. Related to Gibraltar. I know exactly how to specify. Yeah, quite a significant land holdings. So we're excited about the, I think, greater focus. I think it was really difficult having been in the acting role of Public Works Director. It was difficult to stay in the details on everything that was going on across the department. So I think being able to kind of be focused on the water system, and of course, we are embedded and working very closely with our Public Works partners who are essential for our capital program delivery and coordination with our streets. As many of you know, we've broken our new department into 5 divisions. And I think we've probably talked about many of these in detail. I don't think there's any surprises here. I'm really excited about the administrative function. That's something that has been missing for a long time. And excited to kind of be building that group up to help as we're kind of gearing up for, we just got a big team to work on. So I just really appreciate having that element. Org chart, which you've all seen as well. Really difficult to see.
Question, the administrative group is moving from other areas into this, right?
Yeah, so it was a great question. And it was one of those challenges, like we have accounting assistants who help with paying all our bills. And they were typically working for like water operators who don't pay bills and weren't trained in the art of paying bills. But that's how our structure was, because we just didn't really have that administrative function. And so I think I'm getting a lot of positive feedback from a lot of the accounting assistants now reporting to Gabrielle, who our business manager and has paid bills and knows what to look for and can, do a lot of that training that has been missing within our organization. So I feel like that's really helped a lot. So this transition isn't going to happen overnight. We're doing it gradually. We're trying to be sensitive. The general fund has significant deficits they're working from. Certainly us coming out of Public Works is going to leave them with some gaps. And we're trying to be sensitive to those, not putting any undue burden on the general fund from that. So that the timing of that is looking at probably fiscal year 2028, where we'll physically be kind of separated. But I think we're always going to continue to share like support staff. It just makes sense on the HR, council, general reports, things like that. So we are working right now on clarifying our roles and responsibilities. All of our positions have kind of changed slightly, and we're working on developing those roles and responsibilities, setting some goals that we intend to come back to the Water Commission. We're targeting our August work session to kind of dig into that, but just talk about how we're restructuring and how we're kind of focusing, because at the same time, we all have our our divisions will have their, deliverables that they're working on, but we also have shared goals across there. We're working with the same customers at the end of the day and really want to make sure that's part of our mission, vision, and values for the department.
Have you identified some performance indicators that will help you to identify how you're moving towards those goals?
Thank you for asking. Yes. I couldn't. That was great. And we're going to be working on that because a lot of it is that tangible. When our goal is building trust and high regard in the community, how do we evaluate it for moving towards that or away from that, right? And so some of it is some level of surveys with our staff, presumably my happy staff, productive staff yield a trusted and community that has high regard for us. So there's those kind of correlations. I think our ability to respond to emergencies, how fast are we rectifying calls for service. So all of those are KPIs that I think kind of feed into that goal. And so those are exactly what I think we're interested in creating and knocking down here. So one of the things that we picked up a few years ago is just, hey, we need to be checking in, especially once we were dealing with the staffing turnover, like where are we with our staff, And those have been really helpful. We've implemented quite a few of the feedback we've received. Of course, there's a big connection with compensation, and as we often have to talk with staff, I don't set your compensation. That is not something. That is something that HR and council set. Everything else around there, though, I am involved in extensively. So we have been working on our communication. What we did hear from staff was great. Is that the morale was good right now? It's people feel supported. I think there's always room for communication, and we've been trying to figure out the level of communication. Some are like, please don't send me another email. We even experimented with these little 5-minute podcasts to see if that was something that people would be interested in. So we continue to explore it. We started office hours for staff, so 15 to 20 minutes. Anybody in the organization who wants to meet with me can. Absolutely one of the highlights of my job now. I love those. Summers helps coordinate that. And again, trying to get more of the field staff to take me up on it, but really a great opportunity to talk everything. Anything's on the table, your job, we want to talk personal, things you think the department should be doing. And so just a lot of good discussions coming out of that. And like I said, it's really given me a good sense of where we are. The other one that we've started here is the job shadowing program, which this might make the commission a little envious because this thing is really interesting. So I have to credit my team for working on this, and Brad was a big push to get this going. But really offering the opportunity as part of a One Water organization, we set a goal of wanting all of our staff to have a sense of the services that we provide. And often, unfortunately, you may get a job at El Estero and your whole life is at El Estero and you really don't see what's going on, but you are so important to the larger web. And so we've started this job shadowing program to allow folks who may not have that opportunity to spend some time working with the water distribution crews, the water treatment folks, and get a sense, the lab, get a sense of what we do across the organization. And some of those big takeaways is being able to answer questions from friends, families, and the community. Hey, can you tell me about, my sewer laterals having problems? And they can say some basics about the sewer lateral program, and then I can put you in contact with Galen. She's going to be great. Like, being able to do that, I think, goes a long ways at building community trust. And so that's one of the big programs here. And then we've just gotten so much really positive feedback in here. We got Katie here. I don't know if she knew we were going to throw this in here. But we have had, and she's not done, it's an 18-month program that folks, because we didn't want to overload the group. So we've got these cohorts that are going through. And anyway, Katie so far is really enjoying and it's not only that, she's making friends with the cohort, which we try to get a pretty diverse group that's going through there. But it's been really powerful. We even have Madeline, who knows the city pretty well, going through it and really finding that there's so much more to learn. So with that, I want to stop. That's the end of that presentation. But we've got a lot going on. I'm really excited, as you can tell, about this, and hoping in August when we come back, we'll be able to share more with you about progress we've had and some of the performance indicators we hope to be tracking as we go through that.
Well, thank you very much. I think that was very helpful too for us to understand how things are going. Good.
Okay.
I'll just start out saying I think this is a great transition and happy to hear that it seems like it's going well and beneficial for the department. I was just wondering about engineering and also GIS for capital projects or other elements where there's still like other parts of public works that are inputting to the water work and how that functions?
That's a great question, and that's actually something we've been working on, which is how do we break down those barriers? Because I want the engineering team and I want the GIS team, which is now in IT, I want them to feel like they're part of our group. The GIS, two of the GIS staff are located right here in this building, which is great. So we have that regular interactions. But we are working right now on trying to figure out the engineering team. We've got just this enormous workload that's going right now. They are feeling very overwhelmed and stressed. Unfortunately, every time we seem to go out to bid, the projects keep coming in higher and higher. So they're feeling defeated that they can't seem to deliver these projects on budget. And so how can we make them feel part of our team? And so that is actually something I hope to report back in August on, because we have quite a few things that we're working on with Public Works to try and break down those barriers, including kind of embedding them. Right now, they're not embedded with our operators, and I think there's a lot of synergy to having them say good morning to the operators every morning as they come to work, and kind of be more connected to the end product.
Thank you.
Other comments? Yes.
Yes, I'm so excited about this being its own department and the leadership there. And just about culture, morale, and compensation. I want to say that you said HR council sets that. We approve it, but we don't know unless we hear from you. And I think we've had these conversations at Water Commission that were very, very helpful in letting us know how out of step we were with not just, being median, but we want to be employer of choice. Yes. And I'm really glad you put that here as the goal, because we have to keep putting that forward. And I really appreciate the conversations that have come forward at Water Commission about what we need to do, and if we need to do more, what we need to be doing, because we just don't know unless we hear from you and from departments themselves. But really happy that I love the shadowing program, and that's just more to that about collaboration and teamwork, and just having had a water main break again on my street, fourth time in recent history. You're heroes when you work around the clock, and I was able to tell neighbors, no, they're not going to stop until it's done. They're not just going to just go home and leave it broken. They're going to work until it's done. And the work ethic and the way you serve the public and how responsive, almost everybody, talked to like 12 different people. They're like, oh, we already called and got the update. And so I thought, oh, that's a lot of individual phone calls and more that you're answering, and just the level of service in that on all things, from very granular to big things. So just appreciation for that. And then looking at, when you say when projects come in higher and higher bidding, I'm sure that's true in the water systems too. And just maybe thinking about, I'm sure you are, but maybe having more internal staff for being able to handle these things ourselves as outside costs keep going up. That's something I would be in favor of, if that's something you're
I
leaning
appreciate you bringing that up, because we have proposed that as part of the FY27 budget, is to actually hire more internal engineers, because we've gotten to the point where we're just so reliant on consultants to do what I call the bread and butter work, so water main replacement, sewer main replacement. And so bringing that back in-house and doing more of that here, we believe we could probably save about $1 million a year that's currently in excess going out to consultants. Keep it internal with our staff and spend it more in our capital program. So I appreciate your support in that. I appreciate your staff support. I think we are in a good, there's just a totally different culture change right now with HR and with staff as far as compensation. And I think we're in the market right now, which is a good place to finally be. And I think, to your point, how do we stay in the market and how do we remain that employer of choice? And that is a long-term commitment. And so, HR now seems to be asking us for more input on this versus a tell. And so I really appreciate that. So it just feels totally different right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment?
Chair Keller, we have no speakers for public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you very much. So next is our director's report.
All right, Chair Keller.
Right, if you could address the weird climate we're having.
Yeah, what is it? The wettest November on record, second wettest December on record, warmest January on record, and I'm sure we're going to smash some records here. Yeah.
This was the worst one. The rest of them were.
You could deal with the rest. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just going to kind of jump into the highlights of here. Recycle water demand for February is incredibly low. And the plant has been off, but we will be bringing it back online April 1st. That's what we're targeting. That's when we expect the Cachuma spill to kind of wind down right now. Let's see. City water demands are incredibly low right now, around 634 acre feet for the month of February. Last year it was 604. Prior year was 588, but it's down there. It's pretty low, and it should be. It's one of our lowest demand periods. Looking back over the last few years, or a few months actually, we've been around the 600 acre foot range. Again, the community is doing tremendous work in conservation, which leads me to my other point, revenues. Revenues are not doing well. We ended February 7% below where we should be in February for that 7 month period, I guess, 8 month period. We are $5.2 million behind where we had anticipated being. This is a troubling indicator, but given how dry March is, I think there's an opportunity to make up some ground here. I still expect us to end the year about $3 million below where we had anticipated. That's pretty significant, and I think out of as far as the budget picture goes, I'm making some significant changes. Now, keep in mind, we had a 10.5% rate increase this year. It is on par to make about a 3.5% increase in revenue. So pretty significantly off of what we had anticipated. So we are looking at everything to try and figure out how we balance that, because I right now can't expect it to just pop back up to where we thought it was going to be. So we're looking at making cuts, pushing out projects, and should have a more developed plan in the coming months on how we're going to accommodate that. Yesterday we presented the FY27 budget to the city administrator. It went well. And aside from the reduction in revenue, everything was generally status quo. Water main breaks. Okay, this has been a rough week for water main breaks, and I know this sounds kind of silly, but anytime we get temperature changes, it often kind of leads to, it's really interesting because you have pipes that are towards the end of their useful life, and you get changes in water temperature, especially day to night, and it causes contraction in the pipes, and we just historically have found that. And this week we've had 3 breaks. Hopefully none today, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And unfortunately, the Monday and Tuesday are just really disheartening ones. Monday, it was on a 1975 pipe, so it's 51 years old. There's no reason it should be giving us trouble, but this pipe has been giving us trouble for a while now. And unfortunately, in my mind, has gotten to the point that it's just unacceptable and we need to get it replaced. So we're working with that community, who I feel is probably very disappointed in water service right now, to try and be more reactive to this. Unfortunately, with this particular main, Streets was getting ready to do paving at the bottom of the street and had plugged all of the storm drain inlets to keep debris from getting the storm drains, so the water had no place to go and therefore damaged 2 properties. So additional costs with that. So just really aggravating all around on this one. And then, of course, as Councilmember Sneddon has mentioned, we had another break on Lucinda Lane, that whole area. More aggravating there, a new main has been placed in that neighborhood, and we have been at a stalemate with Caltrans, who will not give us an encroachment permit to tie that main in. And so the main is in, but we can't activate it until we get it tied in. And we are elevating that issue, but this is one of those, it didn't come to my attention until this main broke. I'm like, I thought this was in service in December. No, it's not. And I'm like, why haven't we elevated with this contract? So anyway, we've been working to try and get this thing elevated, get it done, because that neighborhood is sick and tired of losing water service and being disruptive, and very unfortunate. And then we also had one yesterday, less damaging, but one on the Mesa. Needless to say, our staff are exhausted. They've been putting in well over 12-hour days to try and stay on top of this, along with all the ongoing maintenance that we have. On to the better note, for Water Commission agenda for April, right now we have hoping to award the Cater Reservoir Resiliency Project. We are in negotiations with them right now. Bids came in 40% over the engineer's estimate. We are trying to bring down those costs back into some type of reasonable range. Very disheartening on that. And we did have quite a few big contractors going out. So what is going on? What's driving it? And I hope to have some more answers for you when we come back next month. And then also we're hoping to bring a draft of the urban water management plan. And then right now there are no items right now for June. Given that, I'm also encouraging staff, if you need to take something, look at May or July. So if you're looking to make any plans in June, that'd be good. And then, as I mentioned before, we did receive that request from Montecito Sand, and we'll be scheduling that for council. Certainly, we'll see where that goes. There's a lot to be playing there. I get the sense that their general manager wants to build a wastewater treatment plant. I think there's a few board members that would rather not and rather just connect to the city. Certainly, there's a lot of complications with sea level rise and climate change of how this would work, but I do think there's a path forward, and as this commission may remember, we have a sewer main that runs through their wastewater treatment plant. The irony of all, because whole of Coast Village is our customers and runs right through their plant. So I think there's a lot of ways we work together. I have no interest in their collection system. That would remain, it would be a Montecito Sand, or, they've been talking about consolidation with the water district, but there would be a collection system, but I think there's a lot of synergy in consolidating treatment. But it's up in the air in my mind where this will go. I really hope. The one thing that I'm on the fence for is whether I ask for a deposit, because I really don't want to we are extremely busy on our end. I really don't want to spend a lot of time having them potentially put up a deposit, and if we reach an agreement, it go towards the agreement, and if we don't, we keep the deposit and offset at least some of our staff time put on this. I don't know. I'm weighing options because I really don't want to spend a long time on this, but I do think this coincides with our plan, our climate adaptation plan, which is to try and look for opportunities for consolidation. So with that, that's the end of my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
I had one question about the rate increases and revenues. I imagine this would be really difficult, but is there any way to parse out the impacts of rates on demand?
Love that question. So we had Madaus look at that, and based on their agencies that they've been tracking, typically for every 10% in revenue increase, there's a 1% drop in water usage. So we're seeing far in exceedance of that. So I think there's a sprinkling of weather impacts as well in that. So we're still trying to tease apart the data to see what is the big driver. And we'll see as things warm up how much ground we make up. Yeah.
Yeah, weather makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much. Do you have any public comment?
Chair Keller, we have no speakers for public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have here in my notes, it says, adjourn the meeting when you're ready or optional to celebrate. So I'll leave it up to you. Thank you very much. We adjourn.